Tonight, slowly, we are going to watch an island be born, and then live, and then return, very gently, to the sea. This, The story we are about to walk through is not one story, but many, the same story told by every volcanic island on Earth, from the long green chain of the Hawaiian seamounts to the high cones of the Canaries, from the great living arc of the Aleutians to the slow black breath of Iceland in the cold North Atlantic. We will tell it as if it were one island, because the rhythm is, in essentials, always the same. An island rises from below, an island flourishes, an island, in time, slips quietly back down. No. To begin, we must go to a place no eye has ever seen. We must go to the deep seafloor in the dark waters of a wide ocean 4 kilometers below the surface, where no light has ever fallen. Here, the rock of the seafloor is thin, perhaps only 6 or 7 kilometers thick, and beneath it, under enormous pressure, in temperatures approaching 1200 degrees Celsius, the rock of the mantle is slowly, patiently moving, the way warm honey moves in a cool jar. On time scales we can hardly imagine. Every few centimeters per year, every few centimeters per year, for 100 million years. Cool. And in a few special places on Earth, this slow honey of the deep mantle gathers itself into a long, narrow upward plume. We call these places hotspots. There are perhaps 50 of them around the globe. They sit fairly still over geological time, while the great plates of the crust drift slowly across their tops. Each plume continually delivers a small column of unusually hot rock to the underside of the crust, where the lower pressure allows it to begin, very slowly, to melt. The magma, rises through cracks in the overlying crust, and in some places, after enough patience, it reaches the seafloor. Good. Any 20 of... The first sign that an island is about to be born is, almost always, invisible. There is, on the wide dark seafloor, a small new crack. From the crack, magma emerges into the cold sea, and is quenched almost instantly into a black glassy crust. The crust holds for a moment, swells slightly, and then bursts at one edge, releasing a new lobe of glowing rock that does the same. This is the slow, patient growth of pillow lava, the strange, gentle, almost lily-pad shapes that pave the deep ocean floor around every active spreading ridge and every active hotspot in the world. Pillow upon pillow upon pillow, one new bulge every few seconds, then every few hours, then every few days, for thousands of years. The new structure on the seafloor begins, very slowly, to mound. It becomes a low circular hill of glassy stone, then a steeper hill, then a seamount 1,000 meters tall, 2,000, 3,000, 4. It rises through the deep, quiet, lightless water. The pillows give way, with greater depth, to other forms, thick sheet flows, then the cooler glassy crusts of less explosive eruptions. The seamount becomes a slow, dark mountain rising through an ocean no one has ever seen. But ago. After many thousands of years, the summit of the seamount approaches the photic zone, the upper few hundred meters where sunlight penetrates. The mountain becomes, almost without anyone noticing, a place where life can begin to live. Small white shrimp gather at its warmer vents. Sponges anchor on its sides. Schools of small silver fish drift over its dim ridges. Whales, perhaps, pause above its peak. And still it rises. After many tens of thousands of years more, the mountain reaches the surface. There is one day a small dome of foaming, hissing water on an otherwise empty horizon. There is steam. There is a faint, faint smell of sulfur. And then, from the foam, a small black cinder cone appears. This is the day, in human terms, that an island is born. We watched something very like this happen in November 1963 in the cold North Atlantic south of Iceland. A fishing boat called the Isle for Two noticed a column of steam rising from an empty sea. By the end of that day, a small dark island had appeared above the waves. We named it Surtsey, after the fire giant of the old Icelandic myths. We watched, with the careful attention of scientists, as Surtsey continued to grow over the next 4 years. Lava poured out, cinders fell, the island lengthened. By 1967, Surtsey had reached an area of more than 2.5 square kilometers and a height of 174 meters. And then the eruption stopped. Birdlay, understand. What happened next is, in some ways, even more remarkable than the eruption itself. Almost as soon as the lava cooled, life began to arrive. The first plants, in the second summer, were small sea rockets, whose seeds had floated across the cold sea from the Icelandic mainland. By the third year, mosses had appeared, lifted in by the wind. By the 7th year, lichens. By the 20th year, dozens of vascular plants. Seabirds began to nest on the cliffs, puffins, fulmars, gulls. The droppings of those birds fertilized the new soil and brought with them, in tiny packages, the seeds of inland plants. A small flock of grey lag geese arrived in 1995. The first ladybug crossed the cold water in 1998. Today, more than 70 species of vascular plants live on Surtsey, along with breeding seabirds, beetles, spiders, and the slow, patient lichens that began the work. Good egg. This is what life is. It is not, as we sometimes imagine, fragile and rare. It is patient and certain. Place a new island in any ocean of this planet, and life will arrive. It will arrive on the wind. It will arrive on the feet of birds. It will arrive in the bellies of fish. It will arrive on driftwood. It will arrive in the dust on a single passing storm. Within a generation, a brand new island will have soil, and ferns, and small flowering things, and a quiet beating set of routines. Within a few centuries, it will have a forest. Within a few millennia, if the climate allows, it will have something close to a fully formed ecosystem, complete with its own endemic species, its own particular silences, its own particular kind of light at evening. Then, But the volcano is, at the same time, slowly losing its connection to the deep plume below. The plate beneath the island is drifting. Year by year, century by century, the island moves a few centimeters away from the rising column of hot rock. After a few 100,000 years, the connection is gone. The lava stops. The island, no longer being fed, begins, quietly, to shrink. Good? The shrinking takes 2 forms. The first is erosion. Rain falls, streams cut, storms break. The soft sides of the cinder cone are slowly worn down. The hard cores of old lava flows resist longer and become the peaked ridges of the older islands. Anyone who has visited Kauai, the oldest of the main Hawaiian islands, has seen this stage. Long, sharp, fluted ridges, deep, narrow valleys, waterfalls falling from very great heights. Kauai is about 5 million years old. It is, in island terms, an elder. The second form of shrinking is more remarkable still. The very weight of the island slowly pushes the seafloor down beneath it, the way a stone pushes a soft mattress. Over millions of years, the island sinks. By the time it has drifted far enough from the hotspot and lost enough of its summit to erosion, it sinks again below the surface, becoming a goyot, a flat-topped underwater mountain, capped sometimes by coral reefs that grew upward as the island sank, racing the descent of the rock beneath them. Good, Nicole's. In some places, the coral wins. As the rock sinks, the reef grows upward fast enough to keep pace, and the result is a coral atoll, a ring of low, pale islands enclosing a turquoise lagoon, with the original volcanic peak still down there, sleeping in the dim. This is what the Maldives are. This is what Bikini and Eniwetok are. The reef remembers, in its careful upward growth, the shape of an island that no longer exists. In other places, the coral does not keep up. The reef drowns. The whole structure becomes a flat-topped seamount, with corals fossilized in its summit, 100 meters down, 200, 300, growing dimmer in the deep water year by year. The whole long story of the island, the fire, the steam, the puffins, the ferns, the long kawaii-like ridges, the slow elderhood, the careful descent, all is now a quiet shape on the seafloor with white shrimp gathered at its slowly cooling vents. Sidam, make it, and the undum. And so, a hotspot, over 40 or 60 million years, lays down a long, slow chain of islands. Each one rises in fire, each one greens, each one ages, each one sinks. We can read the chain like a calendar. The Emperor Seamount chain, stretching from Hawaii up toward the Aleutians, records 70 million years of this rhythm. At its northernmost end, Detroit Seamount, 80 million years old, lies 1,500 meters below the cold North Pacific. Its summit is flat, scoured by long-vanished waves, and capped by the fossilized remains of warm, shallow corals that grew there when the seamount was, itself, a green tropical island somewhere closer to the equator. The seafloor it sits on has carried it, slowly, for the entire span of mammalian evolution. Hawaii itself, currently sitting above the hotspot, is the youngest active island. Loihi, a new seamount 3,000 meters tall already growing southeast of the Big Island, is the next. It will reach the surface in perhaps another 10,000 years. By then, the present Big Island will have started its slow descent. Filters. This is the long, kind, patient rhythm of a volcanic island. Birth, flourishing, descent, a handful of millions of years, a small bright life on the sea. Will. There is, in this story, no tragedy. Each island lives, fully and beautifully, the length of its allotted time. Forests grow and slowly become endemic. Birds evolve, on Hawaii and the Galapagos and Mauritius, into forms that exist nowhere else, and that, for a few million years, are exactly who they need to be. Streams cut deep valleys. Cliffs are sculpted by the long pulse of trade winds. Old lava fields become the bright crimson lehua flowers and the dark, glossy ohia trees of the Hawaiian highlands. None of this is wasted in any meaningful sense. Each island is a complete life. The descent is only the slow returning of the lifted rock to the floor from which it came. Good as you know. It is worth pausing on the strangeness of the Hawaiian chain in particular. The chain bends about halfway up its length in a sharp angle to the northwest. That bend is not a coincidence. It records the moment about 47 million years ago when the entire Pacific plate quietly changed direction. The plate had been moving roughly northward for tens of millions of years, laying down a long line of seamounts that became the Emperor chain. Then, for reasons still debated, but probably linked to the collision of India with Asia, the plate's direction shifted to west-northwest. From that day forward, the plume began laying down new islands along the new direction of travel. The bend in the chain is the only geological monument we have to that ancient redirection. It is a quiet, kilometers-wide piece of memory in the floor of the sea. The volcanoes of these islands in their living years are not all the same. Hawaiian-type volcanoes, the kind we know best, are remarkably gentle as volcanoes go. Their lava is basaltic, hot, and very fluid, like a slow river of orange syrup. It does not explode. It simply moves. A typical Kilauea eruption produces long, beautiful rivers of glowing rock that flow downslope at the patient pace of a brisk walker, and that can be approached with reasonable care by trained observers. The volcanoes of stratovolcanic chains, by contrast, the kind that line the Aleutians, the Kuriles, the Andes, the western edge of Sumatra, hold much stickier, more silica-rich lava that traps its own gases and erupts violently. The character of an island depends on the chemistry of its source. Some islands grow in long, quiet sheets. Some grow in short, dramatic, ash and cinder pulses. Each pattern produces a different kind of mountain in the end, and a different kind of soil, and a different kind of later ecosystem. Like Rados. The soil, in particular, is one of the great gifts of a volcanic island. New basaltic rock, weathered over centuries by warm rain, releases magnesium, iron, calcium, potassium, and phosphorus into the surface soil with extraordinary generosity. This is why volcanic islands, from Java to Sicily to the Azores, are so often the food gardens of the world. The same long process that lifts a mountain into the air, very slowly, refills the chemistry of the soil at its feet. Flapping the pyres. Life on a young volcanic island also has the rare opportunity to evolve into forms that exist nowhere else. Isolated islands act as small natural laboratories, where a few accidental founders, a few finches blown off course, a few seeds in the gut of a wandering bird can, over 1 million years, become entire families of species. The honeycreepers of Hawaii, descended from a single ancestral finch, evolved into more than 50 species with bills shaped for nectar, for insects, for seeds, for snails. The marine iguanas of the Galapagos, descended from ordinary land iguanas, learned to dive into cold ocean water and graze on underwater algae. The dodo of Mauritius, descended from a long-vanished pigeon, simply set its wings down and walked. These radiations are some of the most striking patterns in all of biology, and they happen only on islands. This. The relationship between volcanic islands and the human cultures who have lived on them is also a long, quiet story worth pausing on. The Polynesian voyagers who navigated by stars across thousands of kilometers of open ocean found, on island after island, the same general shape of place: a high green peak, a fringing reef, a sheltered leeward coast, a long windward valley. They learned, over many centuries, to read the age of an island from its shape. A young island, like Hawaii Island itself, has gentle slopes and very little soil and few streams. An older island, like Oahu, has deep valleys, abundant streams, and rich gardens of taro. The oldest of the inhabited Hawaiian islands, Kauai, is a place of waterfalls and ancient forests. The voyagers knew to settle, when possible, on slightly older islands, because the older soils were richer and the rains more predictable. The same logic-shaped settlement across Tahiti, Samoa, the Marquesas, Aotearoa. The whole long Polynesian voyaging tradition was, in part, a slow human reading of the geological age of islands. Good. The Icelanders, who have lived on the long northern stretch of the mid-Atlantic ridge for more than 1,000 years, have developed something close to the opposite relationship, a culture that lives on a still erupting plate boundary, that knows the names of every active volcano, that builds homes warmed by the long, slow heat of the earth beneath them, that has folded into its myths the great fire giant Surtur, after whom the new island of Surtsey was named, the hot springs of Reykjavik, the geothermal greenhouses of Hafnarfjörður, the soft sulphurous baths of the Blue Lagoon. These are all gentle uses of the same long fire that built the island in the first place. The fire does not go away. It is only sometimes louder than at other times. In our own brief time on this planet, we have witnessed perhaps 50 new islands born and a handful return below the waves. We have walked on Surtsey and watched its first ferns. We have stood on Kauai and listened to its old streams. We have sailed across gyots so deep we could hardly believe a forest had ever stood above them. Each of these places, rising, flourishing, descending, is one note in a long song the earth has been singing for billions of years. The plumes will continue to rise. The plates will continue to drift. The islands will continue to be born. Just office? There is, finally, the matter of perspective. To watch a single human life on a volcanic island is to watch a brief and luminous bright spark on a long, slow rock. The rock was here many millions of years before any human eye ever saw it, and will be here many millions of years after the last human eye is gone. The island does not know that we are walking on it. The plume far below does not know that we are watching its mountain. The slow magma in the deep mantle is moving for its own reasons, on its own timescales, by its own quiet rules. We are guests, on this small bright crust, for a moment of geological time we will never fully appreciate. The flowers we pick, the fish we catch, the lullabies we sing on the lanai, all of it is laid down on a quiet rising rock, that is, even now, moving slowly toward its long sleep below the sea. Support. That perspective, however, is not a sad one. It is a deeply restful one. There is nothing about the long story of the islands that asks us to be larger than we are. We are exactly the size we are. The island is exactly the age it is. The plume below is exactly the temperature it is. The reef on the shoulder of the older atoll is growing upward at exactly the rate the rock beneath it is sinking, and the result, every morning, is a long curve of pale blue water unchanged from yesterday. All of it goes on, gently, without our help. Geta Holdwali. If, tonight, this slow story of fire and patience has eased you toward rest, sleep gently. The Earth is making new islands somewhere, even now, in the dark deep waters of an ocean you will never see. They will rise in their own time, with their own steam and their own first puffins. And they will, when they are ready, lie down again in the long quiet sea. None of it requires anything of you. The work goes on, patient and warm all night. Done. Sleep.